The warning sirens echoed through the crystal spires of New Zelari, their haunting melody cutting through the morning air like a blade. Elder Thys pressed his four-fingered hands against the observation deck's cool surface, watching the sky burn orange as another of their orbital stations died. The Vorthak had returned, and this time they brought their entire swarm. Thys closed his large dark eyes and tried to remember what peace felt like. The Zelari had known nothing but harmony for over 3,000 years. Their 12 worlds bloomed with gardens that stretched from pole to pole. Their people lived long, gentle lives filled with art, music, and the quiet joy of watching things grow. They had no armies because they had never needed them. They had no weapons because they could not imagine wanting to hurt another living being. That innocence was dying with their worlds. "Elder," a young voice called from behind him. Thys turned to see Kira, one of his aides, her pale blue skin trembling with fear. "The Defense Council is ready for your decision." Thys nodded slowly. The Defense Council was a joke, really. A group of gardeners and artists trying to figure out how to fight creatures that ate metal and breathed acid. But they were all the Zelhari had left. The council chamber felt too small, crowded with holographic displays showing the destruction across their territory. Red dots marked dead worlds. Orange dots showed worlds under attack. Only 3 green dots remained, 3 worlds out of 12 that were still free. "Show me Verdant Prime again," Thys said quietly. The main display shifted to show their agricultural world. Or what had been their agricultural world. The Vorthak bioships hung in orbit like massive tumors, their living halls pulsing with sick light. Streams of acid rained down on the planet's surface, turning centuries of careful cultivation into smoking wasteland. "How many escaped?" Thys asked. "Perhaps 10,000, replied Council Member Vess, her voice barely a whisper. "Out of 50 million. The numbers felt impossible. The Zelhari were dying by the billions, and no one seemed able to stop it. The Vorthak were not like other species. They could not be reasoned with or bought off. They consumed everything, the living, the dead, even the soil itself. They turned beautiful worlds into empty husks, then moved on to find more life to devour. Have we heard anything from the Galactic Council?" Thys asked. Vess shook her head. "The Etherians express their sympathy but say they cannot risk open war. The Korthani Empire calls it an unfortunate situation and suggests we evacuate to refugee worlds. The Ancestral Synod offers to preserve our cultural records, but no military aid. None." Thys was not surprised. The galaxy's great powers had spent centuries building their comfortable civilizations. They traded with each other, held elegant diplomatic meetings, and avoided anything that might disturb their peace. The Vorthak were too dangerous, too unpredictable. Better to let the Zelhari die than risk becoming the swarm's next target. "What about the smaller species?" Thys asked. "The Mikari? The Centaurans?" "The same," Vess replied. "Everyone is sorry. Everyone wishes us well. No one will fight." Another aide burst into the chamber, her breathing quick and panicked. "Elder, the Vorthak have begun their assault on Sanctuary Prime. General Koth estimates we have perhaps 2 days before they break through our orbital defenses." Sanctuary Prime, their last major world, home to nearly 2 billion Zelhari, including most of their remaining children. When it fell, their species would be scattered to the winds, reduced to small groups of refugees hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy. Thys looked around the chamber at the faces of his people. These were not soldiers or politicians. They were teachers and farmers, musicians and healers. They had spent their lives creating beauty, not destruction. How could he ask them to become something they had never been? "There is one more option," said a voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned to look at Communications Officer Zen, a young Zelhari who spent his days monitoring the galaxy's vast information networks. He looked nervous, almost afraid to speak. "Go on," Thys encouraged. "There is a world on the outer rim. It is different from the others. The galactic databases classify it as a Class 12 death world. The species there calls itself human." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the chamber. Few had heard of this world, and fewer still knew what a Class 12 rating meant. "A death world?" asked Councilmember Wrath. "What kind of species evolves on a death world?" Zen activated his personal display, showing a blue and green planet covered in white clouds. It looked peaceful enough, but the data scrolling beside it told a different story. Extreme weather patterns, massive predators, volcanic activity, radiation levels that would kill most galactic species within hours. According to the files, humans evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill them, Zen explained. They had to fight for everything, food, shelter, even the air they breathed. Most species that develop on such worlds either die out or become too aggressive to achieve space travel. But humans did something different. What do you mean? Thais asked. They kept their aggressive instincts but learned to control them. They became warriors by necessity, but they also became protectors. The early reports from first contact teams described them as dangerously helpful. They seemed to have a strong drive to help those who cannot help themselves. The chamber fell silent. The idea seemed almost too strange to believe. A species of predators who chose to protect instead of consume? Have they been contacted about our situation? Thais asked. No, Elder. Earth is still new to galactic politics. Most species consider them too primitive to be useful allies. Or too dangerous, added Wrath. Thais considered this. The Zelhari were pacifists, but they were not fools. They understood that the galaxy contained both light and darkness, creation and destruction. Perhaps it took one kind of darkness to fight another. Send the message, he decided, Elder. Vess looked shocked. Are you certain? If we invite these humans to our worlds, there is no telling what they might do. What they might do. Thais gestured toward the display showing their burning worlds. Look around you, Vess. The Vorthak are already doing the worst thing imaginable. They are erasing us from existence. If these humans are half as dangerous as their reputation suggests, perhaps that is exactly what we need. He turned to Zen. Send a full report on the Vorthak threat. Include everything, their tactics, their biology, their weaknesses if we know any. Tell these humans that the Zelhari Confederation formally requests military assistance in defense of our remaining worlds. And if they refuse? Asked Wrath. This looked out at the stars where even now Vorthak ships were spreading like a plague through their territory. Then we die knowing we tried everything. But if they accept? He paused, trying to imagine what warriors from a death world might be like. If they accept, then perhaps the galaxy is about to learn something new about the price of ignoring evil. As Zen began composing the message that would reach across the void to Earth, This wondered if he was making the right choice. The Zelhari had lived in peace for millennia. Now he was about to invite predators from a death world into their gentle civilization. But as another alarm sounded and another red dot appeared on their strategic display, Thais knew he had no choice. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to unleash something that understood war. The message went out into the darkness, carrying with it the hopes of a dying species and a question that would echo across the galaxy. When civilized beings would not fight, would the dangerous ones choose to help? Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation lounge of Luna Station, watching Earth turn slowly beneath her feet. The blue marble looked peaceful from here, but Sarah knew better. She had grown up in the Australian wastes, where the temperature could kill you in minutes and the wildlife was worse. She had served in the Amazon conflict, where human soldiers fought in conditions that would liquefy most alien species. Earth was beautiful, but it was also the kind of world that created fighters. "Captain, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Rodriguez from across the lounge. Sarah walked over to where her communications officer was hunched over a portable display. The message that appeared on screen made her breath catch. It was a formal plea for help from something called the Zelhari Confederation, complete with detailed intelligence on an enemy called the Vorthak Swarm. "When did this come in?" Sarah asked. 20 minutes ago. "It's been broadcast across the entire galactic communications network. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy has received it." Sarah read through the file quickly. The Zelhari were herbivore pacifists being systematically exterminated by a hive-minded predator species. 12 worlds invaded, 9 already lost, billions dead. They were asking for military aid from anyone willing to help. "What's the response been?" Sarah asked. Rodriguez pulled up another screen showing the galactic communication logs. Message after message from various species and governments, all saying essentially the same thing. "We're sorry, but we cannot help." The Etherians offered thoughts and prayers. The Korthani Empire suggested evacuation procedures. The Ancestral Synod promised to preserve Zelhari cultural artifacts for future study. Everyone was very sorry, but no one was willing to fight. "Cowards," Sarah muttered. "Ma'am?" "Nothing, Rodriguez. Keep monitoring the channels. I want to know if anyone steps up." But Sarah already knew no one would. She had spent enough time dealing with galactic politics to understand how it worked. The major powers had spent centuries building comfortable, safe civilizations. They preferred diplomacy to war, trade agreements to military action. The idea of risking their own people to save strangers was simply foreign to them. Sarah made her way to the command center, where Admiral Brooks was reviewing the same intelligence reports. Hell of a thing, Brooks said without looking up. Entire species being wiped out while everyone else watches. What's Earth's official response going to be? Sarah asked. Brooks laughed, but there was no humor in it. The same as everyone else's. The Colonial Council is meeting right now to craft a carefully worded statement expressing sympathy and regret. They'll probably offer to take a few thousand refugees just to look good. And unofficially? Unofficially, we're a frontier colony with barely enough ships to patrol our own system. Getting involved in a galactic war would be suicide. Brooks finally looked up at Sarah. Why do you ask? Sarah had been asking herself the same question. She looked at the tactical displays showing the Vorthak advance. Each red arrow represented millions of dead civilians. Entire worlds turned into graveyards. It was wrong, and everyone knew it was wrong, but no one was willing to do anything about it. Permission to speak freely, sir. Always. This is exactly why most of the galaxy thinks we're dangerous, Sarah said. They look at Earth and see a death world full of predators. They're afraid that if they get too close to us, we might snap and start a war. They're not entirely wrong, Brooks admitted, but they're missing the point. Yes, we're predators. Yes, we know how to fight, but we also know why we fight. Earth taught us that the strong protect the weak, or everything falls apart. Brooks leaned back in his chair. What are you suggesting, Captain? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to show the galaxy what Deathworld predators actually do when good people are being slaughtered. 12 hours later, Sarah was in her quarters packing a personal kit when her door chimed. She opened it to find Commander Maria Santos, her chief engineer, holding a duffel bag. Going somewhere, Captain? Maria asked with a grin. Maybe. Depends on whether Admiral Brooks approves my request for extended patrol duty. Extended patrol duty? Maria laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Because I heard through the grapevine that you've requested permission to take the Indomitable on a little trip to the Zelhari systems. Sarah sighed. Security on Luna Station was apparently not what it used to be. And I suppose you disapprove? Hell no. I think it's about time someone with balls responded to that distress call. Maria held up her bag. Mind if I tag along? I've always wanted to see what a real war looks like. By the time Sarah reached the docking bay, word had spread throughout the station. The Indomitable was a heavy cruiser with a crew of 300 Marines and enough firepower to level a small moon. It was also, technically, Sarah's ship to command as she saw fit within Terran space. The question was whether Admiral Brooks would stop her from leaving Terran space. She found her answer when she reached the ship. Brooks was standing at the airlock, but he was not alone. Behind him stood Captain Jessica Walsh of the assault carrier Ragnarok, Commander David Kim of the stealth destroyer Ghostwalker, and several other ship commanders Sarah recognized. Going somewhere, Captain? Brooks asked. Extended patrol, sir. Checking on some remote systems that might have Vorthak activity. I see. And all these other ships? Must be coincidence, sir. Lot of captains concerned about Vorthak scouts these days. Brooks nodded slowly. Well, I can't stop ships from conducting legitimate patrol operations, especially when those operations might gather valuable intelligence on a potential threat to Earth. He handed Sarah a data pad. Of course, if any of those ships were to encounter Zelhari civilians in need of evacuation, well, humanitarian aid is always authorized. Sarah looked at the pad. It contained complete tactical profiles on Vorthak forces, detailed maps of the Zelhari systems, and authorization codes for emergency supply requisitions. Everything a small fleet would need for an unauthorized rescue mission. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Chen. Thank me when you bring my people home. As Sarah boarded her ship, she could hear similar conversations happening throughout the docking bay. Volunteers were signing up faster than the ships could process them. Marines who had never seen combat were checking their gear next to veterans of 3 different wars. Engineers were loading extra ammunition while medics prepared field hospitals. None of them had been ordered to go. None of them expected official support. They were going because it was the right thing to do, and because they were human. The small fleet undocked from Luna Station 6 hours later. 13 ships in total, carrying just over 4,000 volunteers. It was not a large force by galactic standards, but it was what Earth could spare without leaving their own worlds defenseless. As they jumped to hyperspace, Sarah opened a communication channel to the fleet. All ships, this is Captain Chen. In case anyone is unclear about what we're doing, we are flying into a war zone to fight an enemy that has destroyed entire civilizations. The galactic powers have written off the Zilhari as a lost cause. They think we're crazy for getting involved. She paused, looking out at the stars that were streaking past as they traveled faster than light toward a battle none of them might survive. They're probably right, but someone needs to show the galaxy that when the monsters come, the good guys fight back. Today, that someone is us. The response came back from 13 ships at once. Hurrah! As Earth's fleet raced toward the Zilhari systems, news of their departure spread through the galactic networks. Alien governments watched in disbelief as the Deathworld species did exactly what everyone feared they would do. They went to war. What no one expected was that they were going to war to save someone else. The Terran fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sanctuary Prime system, and Captain Sarah Chen immediately understood why the galaxy was losing this war. The Vorthak bioships were nothing like the clean, elegant vessels that most species built. They looked like tumors that had learned to fly. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez from the sensor station. Those things are huge. Sarah had to agree. The smallest Vorthak vessel was the size of a city, its hull pulsing with veins of sickly green light. The larger ones defied easy description, living mountains of flesh and bone that hung in space like malevolent gods. Streams of acid fell from their undersides like toxic rain, turning Sanctuary Prime's beautiful blue oceans into steaming chemical baths. Ma'am, I'm reading 17 major bioships in orbit, reported Sensor Chief Park. Plus maybe 50 smaller craft, and there's something else. I'm getting life signs from inside the ships. Millions of them. Sarah nodded grimly. The Vorthak did not build their ships, they grew them. Each vessel was a living creature controlled by the swarm's hive mind, filled with warrior drones ready to be deployed wherever they were needed. It was elegant in its own horrible way. What about the planet? She asked. Multiple landing sites across all continents. Best estimate is maybe 10 million Vorthak ground forces already deployed. They're eating everything, ma'am. The forests, the cities, even the soil. Sarah opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. All ships, this is Chen. You're seeing what I'm seeing. The situation is worse than we thought, but the mission remains the same. We need to break the orbital blockade and evacuate as many Zilhari as possible. Captain, interrupted Commander Walsh from the Ragnarok, I'm reading significant Zilhari life signs on the planet's surface. Looks like they're holed up in underground shelters and mountain fortresses. But the Vorthak are closing in fast. Sarah studied the tactical display. The smart move would be to pull back, call for reinforcements, and develop a careful strategy. But the Zilhari did not have time for smart moves. Every minute they waited meant more civilians dead. All ships prepare for assault. We're going in hard and fast. Target the smaller bioships first. If we can clear a path, the Ragnarok can get her transports down to the surface. Ma'am, called Rodriguez. I'm getting a communication from the planet. It's one of the Zilhari shelters, Sarah nodded. Put it through. The face that appeared on screen was unlike anything in Sarah's experience. The Zilhari looked almost childlike, with large dark eyes and pale blue skin that seemed to glow with inner light, but those eyes held a depth of sadness that no child should ever know. Unknown vessels, the alien said in accented but clear English. This is Elder Theiss of Sanctuary Prime. We received your identification signals. You are the humans from Earth? That's right, Elder. We're here to help. Theiss closed his eyes for a moment and Sarah could see his shoulders shake with relief. Thank you, he whispered. We had given up hope. But I must warn you, the Vorthak are unlike any enemy you have faced. They cannot be reasoned with or frightened. They exist only to consume. We'll keep that in mind, Elder. How many civilians are you sheltering? Perhaps 2 million across the planet. But the Vorthak are closing in on our positions. We estimate 6 hours before they break through our defenses. Sarah looked at her tactical display again. 6 hours to evacuate 2 million people while fighting off a swarm that had conquered half the galaxy. It was impossible, which meant they would have to do it anyway. Understood, Elder. Stay in your shelters and keep your heads down. This is about to get loud. Sarah cut the connection and opened the fleet channel. All ships, you heard the man. 2 million civilians, 6 hours. Let's show these bugs what happens when they mess with our friends. The battle began badly for the humans. The Vorthak bioships moved like living things because they were living things. They dodged missiles with predatory grace and returned fire with streams of acid that could melt through metal armor in seconds. The smaller ships swarmed around the human vessels like angry insects, spraying corrosive chemicals and releasing clouds of warrior drones. Shield strength down to 60%, called Rodriguez as another acid blast splashed across the Indomitable's hull. "Return fire, all batteries," Sarah ordered. This was where the galaxy learned something new about humans. While other species fought with precise energy weapons and elegant tactical maneuvers, humans had learned warfare in the mud and blood of a death world. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards. Kinetic projectiles, explosive warheads, and chemical munitions that most civilized species considered barbaric. The Vorthak bioships learned the difference when a spread of human torpedoes punched through their living hulls and exploded inside their bodies. The elegant acid spitters suddenly found themselves dealing with weapons that did not care about their biological defenses. Direct hit on the lead bioship, called Park. It's venting atmosphere. No, wait, that's not atmosphere. That's blood. The wounded Vorthak vessel rolled away from the human formation, trailing fluid that glowed green in the system's starlight. But its pain seemed to trigger something in the other ships. They abandoned their careful formations and swarmed toward the human fleet like an angry mob. "They're really pissed off now," observed Commander Santos from the engineering station. "Good," Sarah replied. "Angry enemies make mistakes." She was right. The Vorthak had spent centuries fighting species that relied on shields and energy weapons. They were not prepared for humans, who mounted solid projectile weapons on their ships and filled their magazines with explosives designed to work in any environment. The destroyer Ghostwalker proved this point by launching a spread of what the humans called bunker busters, massive kinetic projectiles designed to punch through planetary fortifications. When they hit the Vorthak bioships, the results were spectacular and messy. "Holy shit," came Commander Kim's voice over the radio. "Did you see that thing pop?" Sarah had seen it. The Vorthak vessel had literally exploded like a balloon, spraying biological matter across several thousand kilometers of space. It was disgusting, terrifying, and remarkably effective. All ships concentrate fire on the larger vessels. If we can take out their command ships, maybe the smaller ones will lose coordination. But the Vorthak adapted quickly. As the human fleet pressed its attack, the bioships began releasing their warrior drones in massive swarms. Millions of the creatures poured out of organic launch bays, each one about the size of a human fighter but infinitely more aggressive. "Drone swarms incoming," called Park. "Estimate 50 million individual contacts." Sarah felt her blood run cold. The human fleet carried maybe 200 fighter craft. Even if every pilot was an ace, they would be overwhelmed in minutes. That was when the galaxy learned something else about humans. When faced with impossible odds, they did not surrender. They got creative. "Santos," Sarah called to her engineer, "how much do you know about our point defense systems?" "Enough to know they're not designed for this kind of target density." "What if we overload them? Run them beyond safe parameters?" Santos grinned. "Ma'am, are you asking me to turn our defensive systems into weapons of mass destruction?" "That's exactly what I'm asking. Give me 5 minutes." While Santos worked her magic in engineering, the human fleet formed a defensive sphere around the Ragnarok as it prepared to launch its evacuation transports. The Vorthak drones reached them just as Santos finished her modifications. The point defense systems that were designed to shoot down incoming missiles suddenly found themselves targeting individual organisms. The computer systems, pushed beyond their limits, began firing at maximum rate with targeting solutions that bordered on precognitive. The space around the human fleet lit up like a fireworks display as millions of laser bursts and projectile rounds turned the drone swarm into an expanding cloud of organic debris. It was beautiful, terrifying, and completely insane. "Santos," Sarah called over the sound of alarms and weapons fire. "Remind me to recommend you for a medal if we survive this." "Just doing my job, ma'am. Though I should mention that we can't keep this up much longer. We're burning through our ammunition reserves and the point defense systems are starting to overheat." Sarah looked at the tactical display. They had cleared a path to the planet, but barely. The Ragnarok was launching its transports, but it would take hours to evacuate 2 million people. "All ships, we need to buy the transports more time." "Ideas," the answer came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Jake Morrison, commander of the Indomitable's Marine contingent, appeared on the bridge looking like he had just stepped out of a nightmare. His armor was scorched and dented from close combat with Vorthak warriors who had managed to board the ship during the fighting. "Ma'am," he said, "my boys and I have been studying these bug ships. We think we know how to kill them." "I'm listening, Sergeant. They're alive, right? Which means they have vulnerable spots just like any other living thing. Weak points where a small team could do a lot of damage." Sarah understood immediately. "You want to board them?" "Yes, ma'am. Get us close enough and we'll show these bugs what humans do best." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. They were exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination. But when she met their eyes, she saw the same thing she felt, the absolute certainty that they would not let. The message reached the Vorthak Queen Mine 17 hours after the first human attack on Sanctuary Prime. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, a Vorthak swarm had been not just defeated but utterly destroyed. Worse, the enemy responsible had managed to evacuate nearly 2 million prey creatures from what should have been a simple harvesting operation. The Queen Mine's response was swift and terrible. Every Vorthak ship within 50 light-years received the same command: converge on the human home system and eliminate this new threat before it could spread. Captain Sarah Chen received word of the approaching swarm while her fleet was still evacuating the last Zelhari from Sanctuary Prime. The numbers were staggering. Over 300 bioships, including several superorganisms the size of small moons. It was the largest Vorthak force ever assembled, and it was heading straight for Earth. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station, "Admiral Brooks is on priority channel. He wants to speak with you immediately." Sarah accepted the connection, and Brooks's face appeared on the main screen. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the past week. "Chen, what the hell have you done? Long-range sensors show a Vorthak armada heading for Earth. They'll arrive in 6 days. "I'm sorry, sir. We knew this was a possibility when we intervened." "A possibility? Sarah, that fleet could sterilize every human world in the system. The Colonial Council is already preparing evacuation protocols." Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. "Evacuation? We're going to run? What choice do we have? We have maybe 50 ships total, and most of those are patrol boats. Against 300 Vorthak bioships, we wouldn't last an hour. Then we don't fight them in Earth space," Sarah said quietly. Brooks paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean we lead them somewhere else. Somewhere that plays to our advantages instead of theirs." Sarah turned to her navigation officer. "Pull up a star chart of the region between here and Earth. I want to see every system, every asteroid field, every piece of cosmic debris between us and home." The chart appeared on the main display, showing dozens of star systems connected by hyperspace routes. Most were empty or contained only dead worlds, but Sarah was not looking for planets. She was looking for traps. "There," she said, pointing to a system marked with hazard warnings. "The Gehenna Nebula. What do we know about it?" Her science officer, Dr. Rachel Kim, pulled up the relevant data. Electromagnetic storms, radiation levels that would kill most organic life, and gravitational anomalies from 3 neutron stars in close orbit. It's been designated a no-fly zone by the Galactic Navigation Authority. "Perfect. What about this one?" Sarah pointed to another system. "The Boneyard," Dr. Kim replied. "Site of an ancient war. The system is full of automated weapons platforms that attack anything that enters. No one knows who built them or how to shut them down." Sarah smiled for the first time since the evacuation began. "Even better. Get me a connection to the rest of the fleet. I want to talk to all ship commanders within minutes." Sarah was addressing the entire human force. 13 battered ships carrying 4,000 tired Marines and civilians who had volunteered for what everyone assumed was a suicide mission. "People, by now you've all heard about the Vorthak response. They're coming for Earth with everything they have, and they're not planning to leave any of us alive." The faces on her screen showed fear, but also determination. These were people who had grown up on a death world. They understood that sometimes you had to fight impossible odds just to survive another day. Now the smart play would be to run home and help evacuate our families. But that would mean abandoning every other species in the galaxy to the same fate that almost claimed the Zelhari. It would mean letting the monsters win. Sarah paused, looking at each captain in turn. "I'm proposing something different, something insane. We're going to lead that swarm on a chase through every dangerous system between here and Earth. We're going to use their size and numbers against them. We're going to show them why humans don't just survive on death worlds. We thrive on them. Commander Walsh from the Ragnarok was the first to respond. What's the plan, Sarah? We split up. Each ship takes a different route home. But we all make stops at systems the Vorthak would never think to use for military operations. We turn every radiation storm, every gravitational anomaly, every piece of ancient alien tech into a weapon. And if it doesn't work, asked Commander Kim from the Ghost Walker. Then we go down fighting, Sarah replied. But we make sure that when other species study what happened here, they learn something important about humans. We learn something important about ourselves. Dr. Kim spoke up from the science station. Captain, I might be able to help with that. I've been studying Vorthak biology from the samples we collected during the boarding actions. Their hive mind structure makes them incredibly coordinated, but it also makes them vulnerable to certain types of interference. What kind of interference? Electromagnetic pulses, radiation bursts, anything that disrupts their neural connections. If we could expose a large number of them to the right kind of energy field, they'd lose coordination, Sarah finished. Brilliant. Start working on it. As the human fleet prepared to scatter across the galaxy, word of their plan spread through the galactic communication networks. The major powers watched in fascination and horror as the Deathworld species prepared to implement what military analysts would later call the suicide doctrine. The Vorthak took the bait perfectly. When the human ships jumped to hyperspace heading in different directions, the swarm split up to pursue them. It was exactly what the Queen Mind wanted, to hunt down and destroy each group individually before they could regroup. What the Queen Mind did not understand was that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history being hunted by things bigger and stronger than themselves. They had learned to turn the hunter's advantages into weaknesses. Commander Walsh led the first group into the Gehenna Nebula, where the electromagnetic storms played havoc with Vorthak bioship navigation. The pursuing ships found themselves flying blind through clouds of charged particles, while human vessels, equipped with hardened electronics, picked them off one by one. Commander Kim took his ships through the boneyard, where ancient automated weapons designed to destroy much larger targets than fighter craft made short work of Vorthak warrior drones. The bioships themselves were too big to navigate the debris field safely, forcing them to break off pursuit or risk destruction. Captain Chen led the largest group through a system where two black holes orbited each other in a deadly dance. The gravitational forces that would have torn apart any normal ship were manageable for vessels, designed by people who had learned to fly in Earth's chaotic magnetic field. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Kim finished her biological weapon. Using samples of Earth bacteria that had evolved to survive in radioactive environments, she created an organism that treated Vorthak bioships like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's beautiful, she explained to Sarah as they watched test results on the lab displays. These bacteria are designed to break down organic compounds in high radiation environments. The Vorthak ships are essentially giant organic compounds floating in space. How do we deploy it? That's the elegant part. We don't need missiles or delivery systems. We just need to get close enough to vent it into space. The bacteria will do the rest. The first field test came when Sarah's group encountered a Vorthak patrol near the edge of the radiation zone around a dying star. The human ships pretended to be disabled, drawing the bioships in close. When the Vorthak moved in for the kill, the humans vented canisters of Dr. Kim's bacterial weapon into space. The results were visible within hours. The Vorthak bioships began developing what looked like infections, patches of dead tissue that spread across their hulls like cancer. Within days, entire vessels were breaking apart as their organic components were consumed from within. More importantly, the bacteria was contagious. When infected ships returned to the main swarm, they brought the plague with them. As news of human victories spread across the galaxy, something unprecedented happened. The major powers that had refused to help the Zelhari began sending secret messages to Earth, offering alliance treaties and trade agreements. Species that had viewed humans as dangerous primitives suddenly wanted them as friends. But the most important message came from the Vorthak Queen Mind itself, transmitted on all frequencies as the great swarm slowly died in the void between stars. Impossible predators, the message said in the clicking, hissing language of the hive. You turn death into life, weakness into strength. You fight like the void itself, patient, relentless, inevitable. The message paused, and when it continued, there was something like respect in the alien voice. The swarm withdraws. We will remember the taste of human defiance. We will teach our spawn to fear the Deathworld hunters who refuse to be prey. As the last Vorthak bioship jumped to hyperspace, heading for the galactic rim, Sarah Chen sat in her captain's chair and tried to process what they had accomplished. A handful of human ships had not just defeated the galaxy's greatest threat, they had driven it into exile. But more than Thelhari Do. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen anything like it. For 3,000 years, the elegant hall had hosted discussions of trade agreements, diplomatic protocols, and cultural exchanges. Today it was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy, all there to witness something unprecedented. The surrender of an unstoppable force. The Vorthak Queen Mind had requested formal audience with the Council, transmitting her message from the edge of known space where the remnants of her once mighty swarm now hid like beaten animals. Elder Theiss of the Zilari Confederation stood at the speaker's podium, reading the message aloud in his clear, musical voice. To the assembled species of the galaxy, Theiss read, the Vorthak acknowledge defeat. The human predators from the death world called Earth have proven themselves superior in the art of controlled destruction. We withdraw our forces beyond the galactic rim and will not return while the human guardians patrol these stars. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The proud Korthani military representatives looked stunned. The ancient Etherians, who had never lost a diplomatic negotiation, seemed unable to process what they were hearing. The Vorthak had conquered dozens of civilizations over the centuries. No one had ever made them retreat. The Queen Mind further states, Theiss continued, that any species under human protection will be considered forbidden prey. The swarm will teach its young to recognize human ship signatures and avoid systems where the Deathworld Guardians operate. Ambassador Kelleth of the Etherian Collective rose from his seat, his translator collar flickering as it processed his rapid speech. This is unprecedented. The Vorthak have never acknowledged any authority save their own hunger. What could these humans have done to achieve such compliance? Admiral Sarah Chen, now representing Earth at the Galactic Council, stood to address the chamber. She looked remarkably calm for someone who had just ended a galactic war, but those who knew humans could see the predator's stillness in her posture. We showed them what happens when you threaten our friends, she said simply. But how? Pressed Kelleth. Our military analysts estimate the human fleet numbered fewer than 50 ships. The Vorthak deployed over 300 biovessels. Sarah smiled, and several alien representatives unconsciously moved back in their seats. Even after months of diplomatic contact, the sight of a human showing teeth still triggered deep survival instincts in herbivorous species. The Vorthak made a mistake, Sarah explained. They assumed that because we're from a death world, we would fight like mindless predators. But Earth didn't just make us dangerous, it made us smart. We learned to turn every disadvantage into a weapon. She gestured to the holographic display that showed the paths of the recent campaign. They outnumbered us, so we made their numbers work against them. They were faster, so we led them into traps. They were stronger, so we made them fight the environment instead of us. And the biological weapon? Asked General Korthak of the Korthani Empire. Our intelligence suggests you deployed some kind of infectious agent. We used Earth bacteria that had evolved to survive in radioactive environments, Dr. Rachel Kim said from her position behind Sarah. The Vorthak bioships were essentially very large, very complex organic molecules. Our bacteria treated them as food. The implications settled over the chamber like a cold wind. The humans had not just defeated the Vorthak. They had done it with weapons and tactics that no one else had even considered. They had fought a war using the very characteristics that made other species afraid of them. What are your intentions now? Asked Ambassador Vess of the Centauran Republic. You have proven your military capabilities. Many of our governments are concerned about future human expansion. Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. She could see the mixture of gratitude and fear in their expressions. They were thankful that humans had saved them from the Vorthak, but terrified that their rescuers might now become their conquerors. That's a fair question, Sarah acknowledged. Earth has just demonstrated that we can project military force across the galaxy when we choose to. A lot of species are probably wondering if we're going to start demanding tribute or territory. She paused, letting the tension build before continuing. The answer is no. We're not interested in ruling the galaxy. We're interested in protecting it. Sarah activated her personal display, showing a document she had been working on during the flight to the council chambers. I'm here to propose the establishment of the Deathworld Defense Pact. Any species facing extinction-level threats can request aid from Earth and our allies. We won't interfere in local politics or trade disputes. We won't demand territorial concessions or political compliance. But if someone tries to wipe you out, Sarah's smile turned cold. Well, they'll learn why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. Elder Theiss stepped forward, his pale blue skin almost glowing with emotion. The Zelhari Confederation formally requests to join this alliance. We offer our worlds as refugee centers and our knowledge of galactic politics to help coordinate relief efforts. The Mikari Union seconds the Zelhari request, called out Ambassador Jenth. We pledge our industrial capacity to support human defense operations. One by one, the smaller species began adding their voices to the growing chorus. These were the civilizations that the major powers had written off as insignificant, peaceful species without strong militaries or strategic resources. Now they were lining up to ally themselves with the humans who had saved them from extinction. Ambassador Kelleth watched this development with growing alarm. The Etherian Collective had spent centuries building a network of client states and trade partners. The idea that dozens of species might suddenly switch their loyalty to Earth was deeply disturbing. This is highly irregular, he protested. Military alliances of this nature require extensive negotiation and formal approval by the Council. Actually, they don't, Sarah replied. I've been reading your charter. Any species has the right to request military assistance from any other species. There's no requirement for Council approval. Dr. Kim leaned forward with what humans would recognize as a smug expression. We've also been reviewing galactic law regarding defensive alliances. Turns out there's no limit on how many species can join a mutual defense pact. The implications hit the major powers like a physical blow. If Earth succeeded in organizing the smaller species into a formal alliance, the balance of galactic politics would shift overnight. The Etherians, Korthani, and other traditional powers would find themselves facing a coalition backed by the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen. General Korthak was the first to adapt to the new reality. The Korthani had built their empire through military strength, and they recognized superior force when they saw it. The Korthani Empire wishes to discuss possible cooperation with the Deathworld Defense Pact, he announced. We believe our military traditions might complement human tactical innovations. Ambassador Kelleth shot him a look of pure betrayal, but Korthak ignored it. The Etherians could play their diplomatic games all they wanted. The Korthani would rather be allied with the humans than fighting them. The session continued for hours as species after species lined up to either join the new alliance or negotiate cooperation agreements. By the end of the day, the Deathworld Defense Pact included over 40 species and had cooperation treaties with a dozen more. Sarah stood before the assembled representatives as the session concluded, feeling the weight of what they had accomplished. 6 months ago, Earth had been a frontier colony that most of the galaxy considered too dangerous to approach. Now they were the center of a new alliance that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. There's one more thing, Sarah announced as the delegates prepared to leave. This alliance isn't just about military protection. It's about proving that the galaxy can be better than it was. She gestured toward Elder Theiss, who had remained at the podium throughout the negotiations. When the Zelhari called for help, everyone said they were sorry but refused to act. The major powers had excuses. They were too busy, too valuable to risk, too important to get involved. But the truth is they just didn't care enough to put themselves in danger for strangers. Sarah's voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, reaching every delegate and the billions of beings watching the proceedings across the galaxy. Earth is different. We learned a long time ago that the strong protect the weak or civilization fails. That's not just our military doctrine, it's who we are. And now it's who we're asking you to become. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, the galaxy began to adjust to its new reality. The age of passive observation was over. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were not content to simply survive. They wanted everyone else to thrive.